You think sending another message is going to pull them closer. It won't. In reality, every extra text you send after they've started pulling away usually pushes them deeper into distance. And almost nobody explains why this happens. Nobody teaches you why an avoidant suddenly becomes cold the moment things begin feeling emotionally close. Nobody gives you the actual communication style that works with someone like this. Until now. Here's the truth most people completely miss about avoidant attachment. The normal dating rules do not apply here. What works with emotionally available people, reassurance, consistency, emotional openness, can completely backfire with an avoidant. And if you've ever cared deeply about someone avoidant, you already know this feeling. You've watched them retreat after intimacy. You felt the confusion of getting silence after warmth.
You've tried harder, given more, explained more, and somehow ended up feeling even further away from them. That changes once you understand how an avoidant nervous system actually responds to communication. Because avoidants are not distant because they feel nothing. They're distant because they feel too much. Somewhere early in life, they learned that emotional dependence led to pain, disappointment, pressure, or loss. So they adapted. They became self-contained, independent, guarded. They built emotional walls so strong that even when they genuinely care about someone, their instinct is still to retreat the moment closeness starts feeling overwhelming. And that's the part people take personally when they shouldn't. The avoidant isn't usually thinking, I want to hurt you. What's happening internally is more like, this connection is becoming emotionally intense, and my system doesn't know how to safely hold that. So the real question is not, how do I make them like me more? The real question is, how do I communicate in a way that doesn't trigger their need to escape? That answer begins with the first type of text, the no-pressure check-in. Most people accidentally attach emotional obligation to their messages. Even something simple like "how are you" can carry hidden pressure. The avoidant senses the expectation underneath it. Respond correctly. Match my emotional energy. Reassure me. Engage deeply right now. That pressure is exactly what makes them withdraw. So instead, your message becomes light, calm, and expectation-free. Something like, hey, this reminded me of you, no rush to reply or anything. Then attach something genuinely connected to them. A meme related to an inside joke, a random article about something they once mentioned, a picture tied to a conversation you shared weeks ago, and then stop. No emotional follow-up. No, I miss you. No fishing for reassurance. No hidden pressure. Why does this work? Because avoidants don't run from connection itself. They run from emotional obligation. The moment they feel trapped inside someone else's emotional expectations, their nervous system starts searching for distance. But when your message feels free, calm, and self-contained, they relax instead of retreating. And what matters even more is specificity. If you remember something small they once told you, something most people would forget, it quietly affects them. It communicates presence, attention, safety. It shows them they were heard without making them responsible for your emotions in return. The second type of text is what I call the grounded, low-investment message. This one only works if your energy behind it is real. You cannot fake confidence with an avoidant. They feel emotional performance immediately. The tone sounds effortless. Just had the weirdest interaction today. Honestly, you would have laughed at it. Or, this place is chaos today. You'd hate it. Which probably means you'd secretly love it. Notice what's happening here. You're briefly inviting them into your world without making them carry the interaction emotionally. You're sharing life, not demanding connection. You're including them, not chasing them. That matters because avoidants are deeply drawn to people who clearly have their own lives. Not people pretending to be independent, but people genuinely rooted in themselves. When your energy says, my life continues whether you respond or not, you stop feeling emotionally heavy to them. And emotional heaviness is what they fear most. The more someone seems emotionally centered around them, the more pressure they feel. But when someone has momentum, purpose, individuality, and emotional steadiness, the avoidant becomes curious instead of defensive. Now let's talk about the third type of message, the open door callback. This one becomes powerful after distance or silence. Most people react emotionally when an avoidant pulls away. They demand clarity. They over-explain feelings. They ask what changed, and while those reactions are understandable, they usually increase the avoidance urge to disappear. The open door callback does something different. Instead of confronting the silence emotionally, you calmly reconnect without forcing intensity back into the interaction. Something simple like, randomly remembered that story you told me about your old job. Still makes me laugh. That's it. No accusation. No emotional pressure. No, why did you disappear? No, do you still care? You're creating a doorway instead of a confrontation. And psychologically, that matters because avoidants often want reconnection, but they fear emotional consequences attached to it. If they think re-engaging means stepping immediately into conflict, accountability, or emotional overwhelm, they stay distant longer. But when reconnection feels safe and low pressure, their nervous system doesn't perceive danger in responding. That's the difference. Now, the fourth type of message is the rarest and most important of all, the emotionally secure silence. Sometimes the strongest message is not another paragraph. It's your ability to stop chasing. Most people become emotionally louder when they fear losing connection. Avoidants do the opposite. They become quieter. So when you respond to distance with panic, over-explaining, repeated texts, or emotional pursuit, the avoidant nervous system interprets it as pressure. But when you step back calmly, without punishment or games, something changes. Your silence stops feeling reactive and starts feeling grounded. And grounded energy affects avoidance deeply because it interrupts the pattern they're used to. They expect pursuit. They expect emotional chasing. They expect you to keep proving the connection for both people. When that stops, they notice. Not because silence manipulates them, but because emotional certainty is no longer guaranteed. And this is important. Secure silence is not coldness. It's not pretending not to care. It's the ability to remain emotionally stable without forcing connection. That energy is rare. Because ultimately, texting an avoidance successfully is not about saying the perfect thing. It's about understanding the emotional experience behind their behavior. Every message either increases pressure or increases safety. Every interaction either activates their defenses or lowers them. And the people who connect most deeply with avoidance are not the ones who chase hardest. They're the ones who stay emotionally grounded while still remaining warm, present, and authentic. That is what makes an avoidant slowly stop seeing closeness as danger. Not force, not pressure, not endless reassurance. Safety. And safety for an avoidant is everything. Avoidant signals. In the end, none of these texts are really about mastering someone else. They are about mastering your own energy inside a connection that has probably made you feel uncertain, reactive, and emotionally exhausted for far too long. That is the deeper lesson hidden underneath all of this. Most people approach avoidance with more pressure, more emotion, more effort, and more pursuit because they believe love grows through intensity. But avoidants do not respond well to intensity when it feels directed at them. Intensity feels like expectation. Expectation feels like pressure. And pressure activates the very defense system that keeps them emotionally distant in the first place. What actually changes the dynamic is calmness, space, emotional steadiness, the ability to connect without gripping too tightly. And that is why these four texting approaches work so differently than what your instincts may have been telling you to do. They lower pressure instead of increasing it. They invite connection instead of demanding it. They create emotional safety instead of emotional obligation. And for someone with avoidant attachment, emotional safety is everything. The no-pressure check-in works because it removes the feeling of emotional debt. The confident low-investment text works because it communicates independence and emotional balance. The open-door callback works because it keeps connection available without punishment or urgency. And the disappearing act philosophy works because it reminds both of you that healthy attraction requires space for two separate lives to exist. None of these methods are manipulative when used correctly. They are simply emotionally mature ways of communicating with someone whose nervous system is highly sensitive to feeling trapped, overwhelmed, or emotionally cornered. But here's the part that matters most. These texts will only truly work when they come from a grounded mindset. If underneath every message you are secretly panicking, waiting, obsessing, or trying to force reassurance out of the other person, the energy behind your words will still carry anxiety. And anxiety changes how communication feels, even through a phone screen. People can sense when someone is emotionally centered and when someone is emotionally chasing. Avoidants especially notice this because they are constantly scanning for pressure, dependency, and emotional intensity they fear they cannot handle. That is why the real transformation is not in learning what to text. It is in learning how to stop revolving your emotional world around one person's responses. Because the moment your peace depends entirely on whether they text back, how long they take, what tone they use, or whether they seem interested today, you have already lost balance within yourself. And ironically, that imbalance is exactly what pushes an avoidant further away. Healthy connection with an avoidant begins when you stop trying to control the outcome and start focusing on your own emotional stability. When you genuinely have a life outside the connection, when you are no longer waiting by the phone, when you are investing energy into your goals, your friendships, your growth, your routines, your happiness, that shift changes everything because now your communication feels lighter, calmer, and more authentic. You are no longer texting from fear of losing them. You are texting from a place of choice. And that difference is enormous. Avoidants are deeply drawn to people who feel emotionally self-contained. Not cold, not unavailable, just grounded. People who can enjoy closeness without making the relationship their entire emotional center of gravity. People who can give connection without immediately demanding certainty in return. People who have their own identity, their own direction, and their own emotional stability regardless of what the avoidant is doing in any given moment. At the same time, it is important to stay honest with yourself about reality. These approaches can create healthier communication, lower defensiveness, and make emotional connection feel safer for an avoidant person. But they cannot force readiness. They cannot heal someone who refuses to look at their own patterns, and they cannot turn inconsistency into commitment if the other person is emotionally unwilling to grow. That is something many people struggle to accept. Sometimes the reason things feel confusing is not because you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is simply because the other person is emotionally unavailable beyond what your patience can fix. No perfect text can substitute for emotional maturity. No strategy can replace willingness, and no amount of understanding can carry a relationship alone. So use these approaches not as tools to chase someone harder, but as tools to communicate with more self-respect, more calmness, and more emotional intelligence. Let them help you create healthier dynamics instead of deeper emotional dependency. Let them teach you how to stay connected without abandoning yourself in the process. Because ultimately, the goal is not to become irresistible to an avoidant. The goal is to become emotionally balanced enough that you stop losing yourself inside uncertain connections. The goal is to learn how to communicate without over-pursuing, how to care without overextending, and how to remain grounded whether someone moves closer or further away. And once you truly understand that, something powerful happens. You stop obsessing over every reply. You stop trying to decode silence. You stop feeling responsible for managing another person's emotional availability. Instead, you begin paying attention to consistency, effort, emotional presence, and reciprocity. You begin asking a different question altogether. Not, how do I make them stay? But, is this connection actually healthy and fulfilling for me too? That question changes everything. Because the healthiest relationships are not built on anxiety, guessing games, or emotional chasing. They are built on mutual effort, mutual openness, and mutual willingness to communicate. And while avoidance may need more space, slower pacing, and gentler communication than other people, the right avoidant, the emotionally aware avoidant, will still move toward connection when it matters to them. They will not leave you carrying the entire relationship forever. So take these texts, use them wisely, and remember this above all else. Your value is not determined by someone's ability to emotionally receive you. Your worth does not rise or fall based on response times, mixed signals, or emotional inconsistency. And the healthiest thing you can ever bring into any relationship, especially one with an avoidant, is not endless pursuit. It is emotional stability, self-respect, patience, and the willingness to walk away from dynamics that require you to constantly abandon yourself just to keep someone close. In the end, this was never just about texting an avoidant correctly. It was about learning how to stay emotionally grounded inside a connection that naturally triggers uncertainty, overthinking, and emotional imbalance. The four texts matter because they help create communication that feels lighter, safer, and less overwhelming for someone who instinctively pulls away from pressure. But the deeper value of these approaches is what they begin changing inside you. The no pressure check-in teaches you how to connect without clinging to an outcome. The confident, low investment reach out reminds you to remain connected to your own life instead of revolving around another person's responses. The open door callback frees you from resentment and emotional scorekeeping. And the disappearing act philosophy pushes you back into your own world, your own routines, your own growth, your own momentum. It reminds you that attraction grows healthiest when two complete people meet each other from a place of balance rather than emotional dependency. That is why, even if this particular avoidant never fully opens up, these habits still transform you in powerful ways. They make you calmer, more self-aware, more emotionally regulated, more attractive in every future relationship because you stop communicating from desperation and start communicating from groundedness. That is not losing. That is growth. At the same time, understanding what not to do is just as important as learning what works. Sending multiple unanswered texts, emotionally processing through long messages, punishing distance with coldness, over-explaining your feelings, or reacting impulsively after conflict all intensify the exact emotional pressure avoidants instinctively retreat from. What feels like fighting for the connection to you often feels like emotional overwhelm to them. And that is one of the hardest truths to accept in avoidant dynamics. The more anxious you become, the less emotionally safe the connection feels for them. Not because your emotions are wrong, but because their nervous system interprets intensity as danger rather than intimacy. So the healthier path is not emotional suppression, it is emotional regulation. It is learning how to express yourself clearly without flooding the relationship with pressure, urgency, or constant emotional demand. This is also why timing matters. Light, casual communication during the day often feels easier for avoidance to process than emotionally charged late-night conversations. After tension or conflict, space matters more than most people realize. Avoidants often need longer than expected to regulate internally before they can reconnect without defensiveness. Reaching too quickly for reassurance usually backfires because it interrupts that process rather than supporting it. But none of this means your needs should disappear. And this is where many people lose themselves. Understanding avoidant psychology should create compassion, not self-abandonment. Yes, avoidance needs space, emotional gentleness, and lower pressure communication. But healthy relationships still require effort, consistency, and emotional movement from both people. The goal is not to endlessly accommodate someone who remains emotionally unavailable forever. The goal is to create a connection where emotional safety allows both people to move closer over time. That is why two things matter more than anything else: their self-awareness and your self-respect. If the avoidant recognizes their patterns, takes accountability, communicates honestly, and slowly works toward healthier connection, then real progress is possible. Avoidant attachment is not hopeless. People absolutely can grow beyond it when they are willing to confront their fears instead of hiding behind them. But if they consistently avoid accountability, disappear without care, blame everyone else, or expect you to endlessly carry the emotional weight of the relationship, then no texting strategy will create the healthy partnership you deserve. Because ultimately, no method can substitute for willingness. You cannot heal someone through perfect communication alone. You cannot love someone into readiness, and you cannot build emotional intimacy by yourself while the other person remains safely behind emotional walls. At some point, their actions have to meet your effort. That is why the real purpose of these four texts is not manipulation, it is alignment. They create the healthiest possible conditions for connection, while also protecting your own emotional balance in the process. They allow you to communicate with warmth without chasing, interest without pressure, and openness without overextending yourself. And when you begin operating from that place, something important shifts internally. You stop obsessing over every delayed reply. You stop trying to decode silence. You stop measuring your worth by how emotionally available another person is on any given day. Instead, you begin watching for consistency in an effort, accountability, and genuine movement toward connection. You stop asking, "How do I make them want me?" and start asking, "Is this relationship emotionally healthy for me too?" That question changes everything, because the healthiest love does not require constant emotional guessing games. It does not survive on crumbs of reassurance mixed with long periods of confusion. Real connection feels calmer than that, more mutual than that, more emotionally stable than that. And ironically, when you finally stop trying to force closeness, when you stop over-pursuing and overcompensating, when you stop making someone else the center of your emotional universe, you often become far more attractive to the avoidant anyway. Not because you are playing games, but because you are finally embodying emotional balance instead of emotional dependence. That balance is powerful. It creates the exact emotional environment avoidance feels safest moving toward. But even more importantly, it creates a life where your peace no longer rises and falls based on another person's emotional inconsistency. And that is the real victory here. Not getting a text back, not winning the avoidant, not finally becoming the exception to someone's emotional walls. The real goal is becoming someone who can love deeply without losing themselves in the process. Someone who can offer warmth without abandoning boundaries. Someone who can stay emotionally open while still protecting their own peace. Because when you become that person, everything changes. The right people stop feeling confusing. Healthy connection stops feeling impossible. And love stops feeling like something you have to chase. Instead, it becomes something mutual, grounded, and real. In the end, loving an avoidant is not about chasing harder, sending perfect texts, or sacrificing your own emotional needs to keep the connection alive. Real connection only works when there is mutual effort, emotional safety, and willingness from both people. The healthiest approach is calm communication, patience, and self-respect, not pressure or emotional over-pursuing. These texting strategies matter because they reduce overwhelm and create space for connection, but the deeper lesson is learning to stay grounded within yourself. You cannot force someone into emotional readiness, but you can choose to communicate with clarity, confidence, and balance. And when you stop losing yourself trying to hold on to someone else, you naturally create healthier relationships, stronger boundaries, and a life that no longer depends on another person's inconsistency for your peace.